London, 1834. They whispered her name like a warning. Lady Augusta Fairborn, too clever for her own good, too quiet for society's taste, too unfit to ever be a bride. Her violet gown shimmered under the chandeliers, but no one truly saw her. At every ball she stood near the walls like a misplaced statue. Pretty enough, yes, but intimidating. They said she read books thicker than the family Bible, and preferred discussing bridges instead of marriage proposals. Poor thing, she'll end up teaching Latin to her cats, murmured one lady, fanning herself. Augusta smiled politely, though her stomach tightened. She had learned long ago that politeness was armor. Her mother believed silence made a lady elegant. Her father believed silence made her invisible. Tonight Augusta would rather be invisible, but the season's grandest ball glittered around her like a punishment. The Fairborns could not afford another scandal. Her sister had eloped with a soldier last year, and her mother now pinned all redemption on Augusta's marriage. She held a small book in her gloved hands, a crime apparently worse than treason. A treatise on Palladian architecture. When nervous, Augusta read. When humiliated, she also read, until a voice broke through her thoughts. Low, smooth, dangerous. Tell me, my lady, do you plan to marry the book or merely waltz with it? Augusta looked up, and nearly forgot how to breathe. The man before her was the Duke of Wessex, Charles Hailberry himself, a legend in scandal whispered to have broken more hearts than promises. His coat was black velvet, his cravat tied with infuriating precision. A man made of money, mystery, and mischief. He bowed slightly, a smirk curling at his lips. I find it remarkable that a woman reads in a ballroom. I find it remarkable that a man speaks before thinking, she said. Too late, the words escaped. A few heads turned. Someone gasped. The orchestra faltered for a heartbeat. And then the Duke laughed. A deep, unguarded laugh that made several debutantes nearly faint. Touché, Lady Fairborn. Perhaps you'll grant me a dance so I may recover my pride. Her heart thudded painfully. Augusta never danced. She feared the rhythm, the eyes, the missteps. But he offered his hand, and everyone watched. So she placed her book aside and her trembling hand in his. The music swelled. The whispers rose. The scandal began. He was confident. She was terrified, yet as they moved across the marble floor, his grip steadied her. Something unspoken passed between them, an odd, fleeting warmth, almost kindness. When the music stopped, he leaned close enough for her to feel his breath. 6 months, he whispered. Let us both see who truly learns from this dance. She blinked. What does that mean? He only smiled, eyes glinting with something she couldn't name. Then he left her standing alone while the room hummed with gossip. By morning, the entire of London knew. The Duke of Wessex had asked permission to court the most peculiar lady of the season. And Augusta wondered if this was love, or the beginning of a very dangerous game. The morning papers fluttered like pigeons in Trafalgar Square. Every column tasted of scandal. The Duke of Wessex had requested a courtship. The city called it charity dressed as romance. At Whitehall Club, the air smelled of leather and victory. Cards lay abandoned, champagne warmed in crystal. 3 gentlemen admired their own cruelty. Lord Bexley tapped an ivory cane on the carpet. He said that a promise among friends was holy. He said that the Duke must honor the forfeit. He said that 6 months would cure the kingdom of its boredom. Sir Oliver smiled with a hunter's patience. He said the task had been simple on paper. Choose a lady no one would choose. Escort her like a prize stallion. Survive the season without disgrace. The Duke listened in silence. His coat was midnight wool. His gloves were pearl gray. His jaw held the pressure of a bridge before the keystone. He remembered the dance. He remembered the tremor of her fingers. He remembered how fear and courage had argued in her eyes. He did not remember ever feeling uneasy on a ballroom floor. Lord Bexley poured whiskey into the quiet. He said the wager required evidence. He said a signed intention would be best. He said a bouquet would look merciful enough. The Duke nodded once. He felt the temperature of his pride. He felt the room tilt toward foolishness. He agreed to send a letter to her guardian. Across Mayfair, the Fairborn house rehearsed composure. Velvet drapes muffled the truth. The butler aligned the silver to face the ceiling. Augusta counted breaths near a window. Her mother wore lilac satin with Venetian lace. Her posture was a sermon. She insisted that gratitude must glow from Augusta's face. She instructed Augusta to speak less than a teacup pours. Augusta studied the cornices to calm her heart. Egg and dart repeated like a prayer. She traced the rhythm of pillars with her gaze. She sketched invisible lines across the mantel. Then the knock came. The household held its breath. The door opened to a cathedral of silence. The Duke of Wessex stepped inside as if the house belonged to him. His tailcoat caught the light. His boots were polished enough to shame mirrors. A small violet boutonniere rested in his lapel. He bowed with restrained mischief. He spoke to her father with formal respect. He praised the family library. He admired the portrait of an ancestor with an honest sword. He expressed his wish for a measured courtship. Augusta stood 2 steps behind her mother. Her gown was soft violet with the lace fichu. Her gloves were the pale of magnolia petals. Her hair fell in a simple ribbon down her back. He turned toward her. He held her attention like a compass to true north. He asked if she favored gardens over parlors. He asked if architecture ever made her pulse run. She said that bridges make the sky believable. She said that columns forgive the weight of history. She said that a staircase can convince a soul to rise. Her voice shook, then steadied like a beam settling. He took a single card from his pocket. On it sat a sketched arch with no keystone. Beneath it a line read like a riddle. Find the center and you will stand. Her fingers brushed the card. Heat rose to her cheeks without permission. Hope tapped against the ribs she guarded. She nodded as if she understood the whole of Rome. Tea arrived with diplomatic precision. Cups rattled a fraction. Her mother smiled with worshipful anxiety. Her father spoke of calendars and propriety. A chaperoned walk was agreed for the following day. A bouquet of violets would precede his carriage. 6 months sounded generous in the drawing room. 6 months sounded fatal in society. The Duke left the house measured and victorious. 4 footmen stared after him as if at a comet. Augusta reached for breath with careful hands. Her mother reached for a blessed future with both. The violets came before noon. They arrived with a sealed envelope and a ribbon the color of twilight. The note thanked her for a dance that wounded his pride. The note asked her to bring 1 book of her choosing to the garden. She chose Vitruvius. She chose a pencil shaved to bravery. She chose her mended kid boots that squeaked at every 3rd step. She chose to pretend she did not tremble. The garden at Hallaberry House was a romance arranged by geometry. Box hedges formed arguments and agreements. A marble nymph turned her back on 3 fountains. Roses leaned into gossip over gravel paths. He waited near an iron gazebo that wore wisteria like royal lace. His coat today was slate blue. His waistcoat was dove with silver thread. He looked like a treaty signed by the weather. They began to walk. He asked about arches and light. She spoke of ratios and mercy. He listened as if listening were sport. At the far hedge he stopped. He asked about the sketch he had sent. She said the keystone holds pressure and peace. She said a false center ruins the whole. He smiled without victory. He folded his hands as if resisting confession. He asked if every design hid a secret. She answered that all beauty keeps 1 key. There was a pause with birds inside it. A thrush tested the air. Some impulse crossed his face like a cloud over glass. He asked for a private promise. He said that if he failed her, she must build something for herself. He said that she must choose a structure no man could grant or take. He said that he would help her draw the first line. He said that the rest must belong entirely to her. She agreed with a steadiness that surprised them both. She wrote a single word in the margin of Vitruvius, center. Then she closed the book as if sealing a pact. They walked back toward the house. Every leaf witnessed the new arrangement. Every servant judged in polite silence. Every roomer practiced its curtsy. In Mayfair, the club doors opened to evening cruelty. Lord Bexley awaited his update with velvet impatience. Sir Oliver dealt cards with a priest's gravity. A pot of gold sat in the middle like a crowned sin. The Duke placed a hand on the table. He confirmed the courtship. He confirmed the chaperoned walk. He confirmed 6 months of discipline. Lord Bexley grinned like a man who had taught fate to sit. He asked for proof of sentiment. He asked if the lady had blushed. He asked if her heart had shifted in her chest. The Duke did not answer. He took the deck and cut it. His eyes held the look of a man who found the river's current stronger than the oars. He left before the hand was played. Night fell with satin arrogance. Augusta wrote in her journal by candlelight. She listed materials she longed to touch. She listed bridges she wished to see. She wrote a sentence she should not have written. The Duke is not what the papers say. She underlined the word not. She closed the book as if closing a door against a storm. Morning returned with a new storm. A maid found a page beneath the shrubbery near the gazebo. It was torn from a betting ledger. It carried 3 names and a sum large enough to buy a village. At the top was written a single word in a confident hand. Wessex. The maid hesitated. She tucked the page into her apron. She hurried toward the servants' entrance with a frightened conscience. She collided with a butler who smiled like polished mahogany. He took the page with gloved fingers. He thanked her for her care. He slid the paper into his pocket with elegant ease. He reminded her that gardens sometimes grow dangerous weeds. By noon, the page had vanished. By dusk, the rumor had not. A wager traveled through London faster than any carriage. It reached the ear of a jealous debutante with a ribbon the color of envy. That night, Augusta stood at her mirror in violet silk and trembling hope. A footman delivered a small box sealed in wax. Inside lay a compass with a broken needle. Inside lay a note written in a hand she already knew. Find the center and you will stand. Meet me at the terrace door at midnight. Her breath caught like lace on a ring. Her heart argued with sense and lost. She wrapped the compass in her glove. She stepped into the corridor where the house listened. On the terrace, the moon stitched silver into stone. The Duke waited at the edge between shadow and promise. He lifted his head like a man who had chosen a side. He reached for her hand and did not let go. She felt the riddle press against her palm. She felt the city hold its breath. She felt the truth circling them like muffled drums. She did not yet see the blade inside the music. A door clicked somewhere behind them. Soft steps faded toward the garden. Someone carried the memory of a torn ledger and a price. Someone planned to place that memory in the wrong ear. Augusta looked up. The Duke looked away. The compass needle quivered without direction. The night decided to keep one secret more. The clock in Hailberry House struck midnight with aristocratic precision. Each chime felt like a heartbeat louder than the last. Augusta stood on the terrace, wrapped in a shawl the color of dusk. The city below breathed faintly under the fog, its secrets tucked between chimneys and carriages. She could hear laughter from the ballroom drifting through the doors, but here only the wind spoke. Then came the sound of polished boots against marble, slow, certain, commanding. Charles appeared, half in moonlight, half in shadow. His expression was unreadable, a study in restraint and danger. He looked like a man both cursed and blessed by his own charm. You came, he said softly. I said I would, she answered. Her voice almost vanished in the night air. He smiled, not kindly, not cruelly either. The city already thinks I've lost my senses. Then perhaps you've finally found your heart, she said, his eyes darkened. Careful, Lady Augusta. You'll make me believe in poetry. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, like lightning waiting to strike marble. He took a step closer. Her breath caught. His gloved hand lifted a strand of her hair from her shoulder, tracing the silk as if memorizing it. I asked you here because I needed to see you without the masks, without your mother's chaperones, without London watching. Then speak, she whispered. He hesitated, and for a heartbeat she saw the truth flicker in his eyes, something that looked terribly like guilt. I made a promise, he said finally, one I may come to regret. She tilted her head. Her brown hair glimmered in the moonlight. A promise to whom? To a few men who mistake cruelty for sport. Her chest tightened. A wager. He didn't deny it, but he stepped closer, the scent of sandalwood and night air closing around her. Yes, he said quietly. It began that way. But it will not end so. She stared at him, every rational thought collapsing. You humiliated me for amusement. I did, he admitted, until I realized the jest was on me. She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist gently. Augusta, please, she wanted to strike him. She wanted to cry. But more than anything, she wanted to understand why his voice trembled. You are not what they said you were, he continued. You are something none of them could measure. You think, you feel, you challenge, and that terrifies them. Her pulse thudded under his fingers. So now you pity me? No, he said. Now I envy you. The air between them thickened with something unspoken. He released her hand slowly, as if it burned him to let go. A door opened inside the house. A flash of candlelight spilled onto the terrace. Lady Penrose, Augusta's cousin and the city's most notorious gossip, stood frozen, her face twisted with delight. My. Midnight lessons in architecture, Your Grace. Charles's expression didn't falter. Some structures require privacy to stand, Lady Penrose. Her cousin's smile sharpened. So does reputation. The door closed again. The silence returned. But it was no longer gentle. Augusta turned away, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You've given her a story," she whispered. "And London loves its stories." "I'll protect you," he said. "How?" With another lie. He took a breath as if preparing for war. "No, with the truth. The world may think me a villain, but I intend to prove them wrong." She met his gaze, torn between fury and faith. "Then you'd better start rebuilding," she said, "because everything between us is in ruins." He almost smiled. "Then I'll rebuild until you call it home." She didn't answer. She walked back inside, spine straight, eyes dry. When she reached her room, she found a folded paper on her pillow. A single line written in his hand. "Find the center and you will stand." She crumpled it, then hesitated. Her heart betrayed her. She pressed it against her chest. And in the ballroom below, whispers spread like wildfire. The Duke of Wessex and Lady Augusta, alone together at midnight. By dawn, her name was on every tongue in London, and one question echoed through every drawing room. Was it love? Or the Duke's most dangerous game? The morning arrived with no mercy. Rain fell like a scandal baptized in heaven. Each droplet whispered her name. Lady Augusta Fairborn. In the breakfast rooms of Mayfair, porcelain cups clinked with judgment. The Gazette printed it first, a midnight meeting between the Duke of Wessex and an eccentric lady of questionable restraint. The sketch beneath the headline was cruel. It showed Augusta in silhouette, her hair loose, her shawl fallen, her dignity forgotten. London devoured the story with jam and scones. At Fairborn House, her mother fainted halfway through the article. Her father slammed his cane against the marble. Her sisters hid behind fans, pretending sympathy. Augusta stood still. Her tea had gone cold. Her face was pale as the lilac walls. She wanted to laugh, or cry, or vanish. Instead, she said softly, "At least they captured my good side." Her father glared. "This is no jest, Augusta. Your reputation is in ruins." Her mother gasped awake. "The Duke must marry you. Immediately, it's the only way to repair what remains." Augusta's fingers trembled around her teacup. "I do not want a wedding built on obligation." Her mother's voice hardened. "Then you'll have a lifetime built on disgrace." Silence swallowed the room. Outside, a carriage thundered through the rain. Moments later, the butler appeared. "His Grace, the Duke of Wessex, requests an audience." Augusta's heart leapt. Her father's jaw clenched. Her mother whispered a prayer that smelled faintly of desperation. He entered soaked to the bone. His dark coat was heavy with rain, his expression carved from guilt and pride. "Lord and Lady Fairborn," he began, "allow me to take responsibility for this misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," her father barked. "London believes my daughter offered herself like an actress on Drury Lane." Charles met Augusta's eyes. There it was again, the flicker of remorse, the ache of something more than duty. "I will not let her face this alone," he said. "If the world demands a name to shield her, it shall be mine." Her mother's hand clutched her pearls. "Then it's settled." "No," Augusta interrupted, standing. Her voice was calm, but her pulse rebelled. "This isn't protection. It's punishment." He turned to her. "You deserve neither punishment nor pity." She took a breath, trembling but defiant. "Then why offer your hand out of guilt?" "Because guilt brought me here," he said, "but something else refuses to let me leave." The room froze. Even the rain paused for a heartbeat. Her father cleared his throat. "I expect the engagement announced before supper." Charles nodded once. "As you wish." He looked at Augusta again, his eyes softer than she remembered. "I'll call tomorrow, my lady." With the ring. When he left, the world outside roared with wheels and thunder. Her mother clutched her arm. "You'll thank me one day." Augusta shook free perhaps, but not today. That night she wandered into the garden alone. The rain had turned to mist and the lamps glowed like fading stars. She stood under the gazebo where everything began. She pressed a hand to her chest. Her fingers found the folded note again. "Find the center and you will stand." "Then tell me, Charles," she whispered. "Where is your center?" Behind her, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Lord Bexley, the man who had started the wager. He smiled. The kind of smile that carried poison and lace. "My dear Lady Augusta, you truly are the most fascinating chapter in our little game." She froze. "Game? Oh, come now. Surely the Duke told you. A friendly wager between gentlemen. 6 months of courtship. Nothing more." The words struck like glass. Her lungs forgot how to work. Her hands turned cold. He tipped his hat. And to think you nearly made him lose. When he left, the garden felt smaller, the air colder, the world crueler. Augusta sank onto the stone bench. Tears burned her eyes but refused to fall. She understood now. Every word, every dance, every touch. A wager, a game, a lie wrapped in charm. The next morning, the Duke of Wessex arrived with a velvet box. He found the butler waiting at the door, expression unreadable. "Her ladyship is unavailable," the butler said. She left at dawn. No destination provided. Charles blinked. She left London. "Yes, Your Grace, but she did leave a message." He handed him a folded sheet of paper. Her handwriting was steady, precise. "You taught me the cost of being seen. Now I must learn the value of being alone. A." He closed his eyes. The rain began again, heavier this time. And for the first time in years, the Duke of Wessex, London's most untouchable man, felt something break quietly inside him. The town of Bath rose from the mist like a watercolor dream. Its stone terraces glowed pale gold beneath the morning light. The air smelled of rain and lavender. Lady Augusta Fairborn arrived with a single trunk, a broken heart, and no maid to announce her presence. Her carriage was modest, her hat plain, her name spoken only to innkeepers. She told them she was Miss A. Firth, a teacher of architecture seeking quiet. No one in Bath cared. No one asked. For the first time in her life, silence was not judgment. It was peace. She rented a small cottage overlooking the river Avon. Ivy climbed the walls. The windows trembled when it rained. Each morning she walked to the Roman baths with her sketchbook. She traced arches and columns with reverent fingers. Each afternoon she sat by the window. She drew until the candle burned low. She told herself she was free, but freedom, she discovered, was a lonely kingdom. Back in London, the Duke of Wessex had become a ghost haunting his own life. Balls, dinners, hunts all refused his attendance. He dismissed Lord Bexley from his club. He tore the ledger that held the wager and paid every debt tenfold. Yet guilt remained unpaid. The Ton whispered that the Duke had gone mad for a woman who vanished. They laughed, of course. London always laughs at heartbreak unless it is their own. 1 month later, he stood before the mirror in his study. He barely recognized the man reflected there. He poured himself a drink but could not bring it to his lips. The butler entered quietly. "Your Grace, a letter arrived this morning." Charles turned. "From whom?" "There is no signature, but you will know the hand." He opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, disciplined, painfully familiar. "To the man who taught me how cruel a promise can be. I do not hate you, but I can no longer admire you. Do not look for me. The world is kinder when you are far away. A." He read it twice, then once more, slower. When the ink blurred, he realized it wasn't the letter fading. It was his resolve. He left London that night. 2 carriages followed him. One carried luggage. The other carried regret. By dawn, the Duke's coach reached Bath. The streets were wet with morning dew. Lamps flickered behind fog. He wore no crest, no title, only a coat of travel dust and exhaustion. He searched for 3 days. On the 4th, a florist recognized the description. The quiet lady. Buys violets every Sunday. Lives by the river. He found the cottage easily. It was small, humble, yet surrounded by flowers. He stood at the gate and hesitated for the first time in his life. Inside, Augusta was sketching the curvature of a Roman arch when she saw him through the window. For a moment, she thought she had imagined him, like guilt wearing a handsome disguise. She rose, the pencil slipped from her fingers. When she opened the door, the air shifted. He looked thinner, older, stripped of arrogance. Rain dotted his hair. His voice was raw. "I came to return your peace," he said. "My peace wasn't yours to give back," she replied. He nodded once. "Fair, I didn't come to beg forgiveness," he said, "only to tell you the truth." She crossed her arms. And what truth could possibly matter now? That the wager was the worst thing I ever agreed to, and the only one I ever wanted to lose. Her breath caught, but she hid it well. "I fell in love with you, Augusta, long before I realized it." She shook her head. "Love built on deception collapses faster than a bridge without foundation." He smiled faintly. "Then let me rebuild it. With your design." For the first time since she left London, she almost laughed. The audacity of him. The poetry of his guilt. "Do you think words can erase humiliation?" "No." he said, "but they can start the blueprint for redemption." He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded piece of parchment. A sketch, a structure rising over a river, a bridge, at its base one inscription. The Fairborn Crossing. She stared at it. The lines were precise. The symmetry flawless. "I designed this months ago," she whispered. "How do you have this?" "I found your sketchbook in the garden." He said it was torn. "I repaired it. Then I built what I could." Her eyes lifted, stunned. "Built." He gestured toward the window. "It's not much yet, but the first stones are laid near the city's edge. It will carry travelers across the Avon when finished. I wanted it to carry your name." Tears escaped her restraint. "You did this, for you," he said, "and for the man I'd like to become." She looked away, heart trembling. "You shouldn't have come, I know, but I can't leave without knowing if there's still a place for me in your heart." She hesitated. Her voice was barely audible. "Not yet," he nodded. "Then I'll wait at the bridge." And he left, without looking back. That night, as rain returned to Bath, Augusta stood by her window watching the distant lights near the river. Somewhere out there, a man who once mocked her was building something in her name, and for the first time she began to wonder. Perhaps forgiveness, like architecture, required patience. Perhaps it needed design, and a heart strong enough to hold the weight of a second chance. Augusta walked toward the construction site with hesitant steps. The hem of her dress brushed the damp grass. Her hands were hidden inside her cloak. She had not slept. From afar, the bridge was beginning to take shape, stone by stone, curve by curve, a skeleton of hope built against the current. Dozens of workers moved with rhythm and purpose. But one man stood apart. No coat, no title, only a pair of rolled sleeves and eyes that had learned humility. Charles. He was lifting a stone, his gloves dirty, his voice calm as he gave instructions. He looked nothing like the Duke of Wessex. He looked like a man who had traded pride for peace. Augusta stopped near the arch. For a long moment she only watched him. He did not notice her, and that was what broke her most. When he finally turned, he froze. The distance between them was no more than a breath, but it felt like years. "You should not be here," he said softly. She lifted her chin. "Someone has to make sure the structure holds." He almost smiled. "You doubt my craftsmanship. I doubt your intentions." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Then let me show you." He led her closer to the first completed arch. Under the morning light, the carved stones gleamed with faint inscriptions. Every block bore a small symbol. She recognized it at once. The same geometric mark she used in her drawings. "You used my pattern," she whispered. He looked at her. "I wanted to remember who guided the design." Her eyes moved over the arch. The curvature was perfect, the alignment true, the foundation deep enough to withstand both storm and rumor. It was beautiful, too beautiful for pride. She touched the cool stone, her fingertips tracing her own mark. For a moment she forgot the pain. She only saw creation. He stood beside her, silent. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Every day I come here to work. It reminds me that something broken can be built again, not by command, but by choice." She looked at him. "And what is this bridge to you?" "Redemption," he said simply, "and perhaps a way back to you." Her throat tightened. "You cannot build forgiveness with stone." "No, but I can build proof that I am trying." The wind moved her hair across her face. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed it aside gently. The touch was brief, reverent, almost shy. Augusta's heart betrayed her with a single pulse too strong. "Why wait for me?" she asked. "Because you are worth waiting for." The words landed softly. No grandeur. No manipulation. Just truth. A worker called for his attention. He stepped back, leaving a space between them like a breath held too long. She watched him return to his task. Each movement deliberate, each gesture humble. Something shifted quietly inside her. Not forgiveness, but the beginning of it. Days passed. She returned to the bridge again and again. Sometimes she watched. Sometimes she helped. Sometimes they spoke of nothing at all. One afternoon she arrived with a book under her arm. He looked up, surprised. "I brought plans," she said. "For the second arch." He smiled. "You trust me with another?" "No," she said, almost teasing. "I trust the bridge." He laughed, a sound that carried warmth through the cold air. They worked side by side until the sun melted behind the hills. When the last stone settled, he turned to her. "You know," he said quietly, "this bridge will outlive us both." "Good," she said. "Then it will remember what we built when words were not enough." He looked at her. Something unspoken hung between them. Not desire, not yet, but tenderness beginning to take root. That night, Bath slept under silver rain. Augusta sat by her window with ink-stained fingers and a lighter heart. She wrote in her journal, "The bridge stands. So do I." Perhaps both can carry more weight than we ever imagined. At the same hour, across the river, Charles stood beneath the arch they had built. He placed his hand on the stone, feeling its steady pulse. Then he whispered to the night, "Find the center, and you will stand." The bridge stood half-finished, but London had already begun to tear it down with words. By the time winter arrived, the gossip reached Bath like a cold wind. Newspapers hinted that the Duke of Wessex had lost his fortune, that his bridge was a vanity project built for a woman who ruined him, that he had gone mad chasing love where none existed. Augusta read the article in silence. The ink felt heavier than the paper. She could almost hear the laughter of society echoing behind the lines. The world had taken its revenge. Now it was his turn to fall. She closed the paper slowly. Her heart was steady. Her mind was not. By noon, she was on her way to London. The journey was long and restless. Rain followed her carriage like guilt following grace. She tried to convince herself that she was going for justice, not because her heart ached every time she thought of him. The Duke's townhouse stood quiet when she arrived. The servants bowed, surprised but grateful. He had dismissed most of them weeks ago. Only the butler remained, loyal as silence. "Your Grace is in the study," he said softly, "but he is not himself." She nodded, then opened the door. The room was dark. The fire burned low. Papers were scattered across the desk, maps of the bridge mixed with unpaid bills. Charles sat in a chair near the window. His posture was straight, but his eyes were tired. Augusta took a breath. "You once told me that all beauty keeps one key." He turned, startled by her voice. His expression changed from disbelief to something fragile. "Augusta." She stepped closer. "I came because the world has turned against you." He smiled faintly. The kind of smile that had forgotten joy. Then it has finally learned good taste. She ignored the jest. "You built something honest. They mock what they cannot understand." He stood, the movement slow, the weight of failure heavy on his shoulders. "I built a bridge, Augusta, but perhaps I forgot how to cross it myself." She met his gaze. "Then let me remind you how." For a long moment neither spoke. Then she walked toward the desk, gathering the scattered papers. Each one bore his handwriting, his calculations, his effort, his guilt. "You are not the same man who made that wager," she said, "and I am not the same woman who cried because of it." He looked at her. "You should hate me, I tried," she said quietly. "But the heart has poor discipline." Something in him broke open. The armor of pride cracked, letting warmth through. He stepped closer. "If I asked for forgiveness now, would it be too soon?" She shook her head gently. "It would be too late for pride, but not for love." He lowered his gaze. Then he did something no one in London would ever believe. He knelt. The Duke of Wessex, the man once known for arrogance and charm, on his knees before the woman society had called peculiar. "I do not deserve you," he said, "but I will spend every day trying to be a man worthy of your forgiveness." Tears filled her eyes. Not from sorrow, from peace. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then rise, Charles. The bridge will not finish itself." He stood slowly. The air between them felt lighter, as if the storm had finally ended. That night they worked side by side again. Blueprints spread across the table, ink staining their hands. He corrected a measurement. She adjusted a line. Neither spoke of love, but both built it quietly. Days later, London began to change its tune. The scandal that had mocked them became curiosity. The story of a duke rebuilding his honor for a woman became admiration. When the bridge finally opened to the public, the city gathered by the river Avon. Augusta stood beside Charles, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The mayor spoke. The choir sang. Bells from Bath Abbey echoed through the valley. And when the ribbon was cut, Augusta felt something shift inside her. Not pride, not triumph, but the quiet certainty that love, when honest, can survive even the worst of storms. Charles turned to her. His voice was soft. The bridge stands. So do we, she smiled, then whispered. Find the center, and you will stand. He looked at her, eyes warm, heart full. I already have. The season had returned. New gowns shimmered. New scandals waited to be born. But this time the whispers carried a different name. Lady Augusta Fairborn. She was no longer the quiet girl hiding behind her book, no longer the oddity of the ballroom. She was the woman who helped build a bridge. A bridge that carried not only travelers but redemption itself. London spoke of it as if it were legend. They said the Duke of Wessex had changed. They said his pride had turned to purpose. They said love had tamed a man who once thought himself untouchable. The Duchess of Pembroke hosted the first grand ball of the year. Every candle burned brighter than truth. Every diamond sparkled like a promise about to break. Augusta entered on her own. Her gown was pale violet satin embroidered with silver leaves. Her hair was pinned with delicate pearls. There was no hesitation in her steps. Only calm. The room went silent. Dozens of fans fluttered in slow disbelief. And then, as society always does, they smiled as if they had loved her all along. Lady Penrose approached first, the cousin whose gossip had once destroyed her. My dear Augusta, how radiant you look. Bath must have suited you. Augusta met her eyes with quiet grace. Bath teaches more than fashion. It teaches strength. Her cousin's fan trembled. Augusta smiled politely, then walked away. Across the ballroom, Charles stood near the orchestra. He wore a black tailcoat, a waistcoat of ivory silk, and an expression that could melt frost. When he saw her, the air itself seemed to breathe differently. He crossed the floor without hesitation. Every pair of eyes followed him. Every whisper sharpened into wonder. He bowed slightly. Lady Augusta, may I have the honor? Her heart answered before her lips did. You may. The orchestra began to play. Strings swelled like memory. They moved together, graceful, certain as if the room had disappeared. For the first time, Augusta was not afraid to be seen. And for the first time, Charles was not afraid to feel. When the dance ended, applause broke out. Society had found a new story to adore. Not a scandal. A miracle. The Duchess approached with a glass of champagne. The bridge you built, Your Grace, is magnificent. A true gift to the city. Charles smiled faintly. The credit belongs to the lady who designed it. She taught me that some foundations are built with faith, not fortune. All eyes turned to Augusta. She held her chin high, but her voice was soft. Sometimes the heart needs rebuilding, too. The Duchess nodded with rare sincerity. And sometimes, my dear, it needs the right architect. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But this time it was warm. Later that night, Charles and Augusta slipped out onto the terrace. The same terrace where everything had begun. The same moon. The same city. But no masks left to wear. Do you regret forgiving me? He asked quietly. She looked up at the stars. No. Regret is for those who stop learning. And what have we learned? That forgiveness is not weakness. That love is not a wager. That bridges hold best when built from both sides. He smiled, then leaned closer, his voice low and unguarded. Then let this be the last one I ever build without you. She laughed softly. Then stop talking and prove it. He kissed her. Not the desperate kiss of a man begging absolution, but the calm, sure kiss of one who had found his center at last. Inside, the orchestra began another waltz. Outside, London's stars watched in quiet approval. And for the first time, both of them understood. Forgiveness is not the end of love. It is where love truly begins. Peace never lasts long in London, especially when envy still breathes. For months, the Duke and Lady Augusta had lived beneath quiet admiration. The bridge stood tall. Their story had softened even the coldest salons. But not every heart had turned kind. One afternoon, a letter arrived at Wessex House. The paper was thick. The seal familiar, the signature venomous. Lord Bexley. Charles read it alone in his study. The words were polished, but the tone reeked of malice. He threatened exposure. He claimed he possessed proof of the wager. He demanded gold for silence, and he promised ruin if denied. Charles crushed the paper in his hand. He had faced battlefields and scandals, but nothing wounded like old shame returning to collect its debt. That evening, Augusta found him by the fire. His expression was carved from stone. The flames threw shadows over his face. What troubles you? She asked. He hesitated, then handed her the letter. She read it once, then again. Her face remained calm, Only her eyes betrayed the storm. "So he wants to resurrect what we already buried," she said. "He will not stop." Charles replied. "He wants the bridge destroyed, and me along with it." She folded the letter slowly, then looked at him with quiet strength, then let him try. He frowned. "Augusta." She stepped closer. "Do you remember what I told you once? You taught me the cost of being seen. Now let me show you the value of standing tall." The next morning she sent her own letter, not to Lord Bexley, but to the Gazette. 3 days later, London read her words on the front page. A letter signed by Lady Augusta Fairborn. She confessed that once there had been a foolish wager. That pride had wounded both hearts. That from that wound had risen something the city could not understand. A bridge, a partnership, a love rebuilt with truth and humility. Her build bridges for redemption. History will decide which lasts longer. By noon, every tea table in Mayfair buzzed. But for the first time, the scandal favored the woman. Lord Bexley raged in his club. He slammed his fist on the table, but no one looked at him. He was no longer amusing. He was old news. That night he arrived at the bridge under cloak of fog. He brought a lantern and hatred for company. He meant to burn what love had built, but Augusta was already there, waiting. Her violet cloak shimmered faintly in the mist. Her voice was calm. "You came to destroy what you never understood," he sneered. "You think you've beaten me? The world forgets quickly, Lady Fairborn, perhaps," she said, "but stone remembers." Behind her, the Duke emerged from the shadows. 2 guards followed. Bexley froze. "You once made me a fool," Charles said. "But now you will leave as one." Bexley's defiance faltered. He tried to speak, but no words came. Charles gestured to the guards. "Escort Lord Bexley out. Let him see the bridge one last time on his way down." As the carriage wheels faded into the distance, silence returned. Augusta turned to him. "You knew I wrote to the Gazette." He nodded. "I suspected it. And you let me. I trusted you." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we both learned to share the weight." He looked toward the river. The moonlight danced across the water, turning the bridge silver. "This could have ended differently," he said quietly. "It did," she replied, "because we built more than stone. We built truth." He reached for her hand. She did not pull away. The night air was cool. The future felt possible, and as they stood there, the bridge rose behind them, unbroken, unburned, alive. The fog lifted from the Thames like a curtain before a stage. Carriages lined the street before Wessex House. The city was awake, and so were the rumors. An announcement had been made that morning. The Duke of Wessex would address the press. Society prepared for spectacle. They always did. Augusta stood at the top of the grand staircase. Her gown was ivory with embroidered violets along the hem. Her hair fell softly around her shoulders. She looked calm, but her heart raced like thunder behind marble. Below, Charles adjusted his cufflinks. He wore black as tradition demanded, yet something in him felt lighter. He had decided to speak truth and let the city do what it pleased. When the clock struck 11, he stepped onto the balcony. Rain clouds gathered but did not fall. Reporters lifted their pens. Curiosity buzzed through the crowd. The Duke of Wessex stood tall, once feared, now humbled. He began without pretense. "London loves a story. You have written mine more times than I can count. But today, allow me to tell it myself." He paused, every whisper died. "Months ago I made a foolish wager, a cruel game born of arrogance. I chose a lady not for her beauty or rank, but because I believed she would never matter to me." He looked toward the window where Augusta watched. And yet she became the only thing that did. The crowd stirred. Rain began to fall, soft and steady, like tears too proud to be seen. He continued. "She forgave me when the world would not. She taught me that love cannot be built on pride, that redemption demands labor, not luxury, and that a bridge, whether of stone or of hearts, must begin with a foundation of truth." He held up a small box. Inside rested a ring of simple gold. "I will not ask London to approve. I will only ask her to accept." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Above them, Augusta stepped forward. She walked onto the balcony, uninvited but welcome. She stopped beside him. The city held its breath. He turned to her. "Augusta Fairborn, will you finish what we began?" Her voice was steady. "We already have." She slipped the ring onto her own finger. The crowd erupted. Applause, shouts, laughter. For once, London celebrated love instead of gossip. Charles turned to her again. "The bridge stands because you believed in it. I stand because you believed in me." She smiled faintly. "Then keep standing, Your Grace. You still have work to do." He laughed. It was the sound of a man who had finally forgiven himself. Later that night, after the carriages had gone and the city had quieted, Augusta walked onto the terrace. Rain glistened on the stone. The moon hung low over the river. Charles joined her in silence. No titles, no masks, no wagers, just two souls rebuilt by grace. He reached for her hand. Their fingers met. "You once said forgiveness is not weakness," he whispered. "You were right. It is the weight that keeps us standing." She looked at him. "And you carry it well." He smiled. "So do you." They stood there as the clock struck midnight. The city below glowed like 1,000 stars reflected on the water, and somewhere in the distance the bridge of their making held firm against the tide. The bells of St. George's Chapel rang across the square. Each note was bright as forgiveness. Each echo a reminder that even scandals can end in grace. Inside, London's finest filled the pews. Every duchess, every debutante, every gossip dressed in their best curiosity. They had come not to bless the union, but to witness a miracle they had once mocked. At the front of the chapel, the Duke of Wessex stood in tailored perfection. His coat was navy trimmed with gold, his gloves white, his expression calm, though his heart thundered beneath the fabric. He turned when the doors opened, and the room forgot to breathe. Augusta walked down the aisle in a gown of soft ivory muslin, simple yet regal. Her veil shimmered like morning dew. Tiny violets embroidered along the hem caught the light as she moved. No jewels, no excess, just grace. Her father walked beside her, proud and quiet. Even he had learned humility from his daughter's courage. Whispers followed her steps. She heard them all, but none could touch her now. When she reached Charles, the music faded into silence. He looked at her as if seeing the first sunrise after a storm. "You came," he whispered. She smiled. "Always." The vicar began to speak. Words about love, faith, and forgiveness filled the chapel, but neither of them heard the sermon. Their eyes said everything. When it came time to answer, Charles's voice was steady. "I will love, honor, and protect her for all my days." And Augusta's voice was soft but sheer. "I will stand beside him through every season, as long as the bridge holds." A pause followed. Then, for the first time, London applauded a promise. Outside, the crowd gathered to see them step into sunlight. The bridge bells in Bath rang in unison, a gift from the workers who helped build it. Even the newspapers printed a headline without malice. "The Duke redeemed. The lady restored." They rode away in an open carriage, laughter mixing with the wind. Children waved flowers from the streets. The scent of lilac filled the air. Halfway through the ride, Augusta turned to him. "Do you think they'll ever stop talking about us?" He laughed softly. "Never. But at least now they tell the right story." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then let them talk." They returned to Bath weeks later. The bridge stood finished, strong, beautiful, the name Fairbourne Crossing carved proudly into the stone. Charles took her hand and led her across. The water below sparkled with sunlight. Every step felt like memory turned to peace. Halfway across, he stopped. The world around them was quiet except for the river's calm voice. "This bridge began as my punishment," he said. "Now it is my promise." She looked up at him. "Then keep it." He smiled, always. They stood together at the center, the place where everything began, where a wager became love, and pride became redemption. Augusta closed her eyes for a moment. The wind brushed her veil. The sound of the river sang beneath them. Forgiveness had taken time, but it had built something that even London could not destroy. When she opened her eyes, she saw Charles watching her with quiet devotion. He said one last thing as the sky turned gold above the Avon. "Some bridges are meant to last forever." And she answered softly, "So are we." The morning sun rested gently over Fairbourne Estate. The gardens were in bloom. The bridge in the distance shone like memory polished by time. Lady Augusta, now Duchess of Wessex, walked barefoot through the grass. Her gown was simple linen, her hair loose, touched by a few strands of silver. The years had softened her face, but her eyes still carried the same light that once challenged a duke to change. Behind her, laughter echoed. Children. Two little voices chasing each other between the hedges. One boy with Charles's dark hair. One girl with Augusta's calm eyes. They ran across the garden carrying a wooden model of a bridge. Their father followed, pretending to be out of breath. He was not the proud, untouchable Duke London once feared. He was simply Charles now. A husband, a father, a man who had learned that humility was not loss but victory. He caught the boy, lifting him high. The girl clung to Augusta's skirt, giggling. "Careful, my loves," the Duchess laughed. "That model took 2 days to build." Charles smiled. "Then it will hold just like the real one." He set the boy down and walked toward her. His hands, once used for signatures and wagers, now carried the marks of garden work and play. "You still wake early," he said softly. "Habit," she replied. "The world feels kindest before it fully wakes." He took her hand. "And yet you never rest," she smiled. "Someone has to keep you from adding fountains where they don't belong." He laughed, deep and warm. Their marriage was not perfect. It was real, and that made it beautiful. They sat together under the willow by the water. The children played nearby, their laughter floating like melody. Augusta watched the river flow beneath the bridge. It had weathered storms just as they had. The stones carried moss now, soft and green, but it still stood strong and patient. Charles looked at her quietly. "Do you ever miss London?" She shook her head. "London was noise. This is music," he nodded. Then looked toward their children. "One day they will ask how we met." "Then tell them the truth," she said, "that their father was arrogant, and their mother had poor timing." He laughed again. "I will. But I will also tell them that love is not found at balls. It is built, stone by stone, choice by choice." Augusta rested her head on his shoulder. The breeze carried the scent of violets. Her heart felt still, content, whole. The church bells from Bath rang in the distance. The children waved from the garden wall. Charles stood and offered his hand. "Come, Duchess. The day waits for us." She took his hand, rising slowly. Every step beside him still felt like the first. Every glance still carried the same quiet wonder. As they walked back toward the house, Augusta looked once more at the bridge. The sunlight danced upon it, golden and sure. Somewhere deep within her heart she heard his old words again. "Find the center and you will stand." She smiled, because they had found it, not in pride, not in perfection, but in forgiveness. The world would forget the scandal, but the bridge would remain, and so would they. Love is not the story of two flawless people. It is the story of two souls who refuse to let their brokenness be the end. Forgiveness builds what time alone cannot, and kindness, when chosen every day, becomes the truest form of strength. If you believe that love still redeems, share this story, leave your heart in the comments, and subscribe for more tales of courage and grace. In the end, love was never the wager. It was the lesson. They built a bridge that defied time, not because of fortune or titles, but because they chose each other every day, through silence, through storms, through the long work of forgiveness. Augusta taught that a heart does not lose value for being different. It shines brighter when it dares to think, to feel, and to stand. She showed that intelligence and kindness are not opposites. They are the pillars that hold true love in place. Charles proved that redemption is not spoken. It is lived. One gesture, one apology, one act of courage at a time. He learned that kneeling is not defeat, but grace finding its form, and together they discovered that forgiveness is the most beautiful kind of architecture, because it rebuilds what pride once broke. So when you look at your own life, remember this: the bridges you build with love will always outlast the walls built by fear. The world may forget your name, but not the kindness you leave behind. And when storms come, as they always do, find your center. Stand there, and love again. If this story touched your heart, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let others know that love, when patient and true, can rewrite even the cruelest past. Subscribe for more tales of redemption, courage, and the kind of romance that heals instead of hurts. Your support keeps every story alive. From my heart to yours, thank you for being here, because every bridge we build together begins with you. In the end, love was never the wager. It was the lesson. They built a bridge that defied time, not because of fortune or titles, but because they chose each other. Again and again, even when it hurt, even when silence seemed safer than truth. Augusta taught that a heart does not lose its worth by being different. It shines brighter when it dares to see the world with depth and tenderness. She reminded us that intelligence and emotion can walk hand in hand, that kindness is never weakness, and that gentleness is sometimes the strongest force of all. Charles learned that redemption is not found in grand speeches, But in quiet actions that speak louder than pride, he discovered that kneeling is not defeat. It is the soul finally learning to listen. Together they built something greater than love. They built forgiveness, a kind of architecture that no storm can destroy. And maybe that is what love truly is. The courage to rebuild, the humility to begin again, the grace to believe that hearts, like bridges, can stand the test of time if built with truth. So if life ever breaks you, remember this story. The world may laugh, judge, or misunderstand you, but the beauty of your heart will outlast every rumor. The bridges you build through compassion will always outshine the walls built by fear. Find your center, stand there, and love again.